Hey there guys, Portalmaster here, and oh man, this is going to be a very controversial video. I am going to be today ranking the Skylanders games from my least favorite to my favorite. Now, what I am doing is I am going to do this video right now, and then I am going to do this video in several months from now. So, I have not played Skylanders beyond Superchargers on stream very much lately. I basically I played it for a good bit, and then essentially after Imaginators, I'll be honest with you guys, I really haven't played it too much. And so, a lot of my opinions of these games are based strongly on nostalgia. And so, I kind of don't have them the freshest in my head in terms of being able to rank them. So what I want to do is I want to rank them first off of how I remember them. And then on stream, once I get my Elgato, we're going to be playing through Spyro's Adventure to Imaginators, and we're going to be streaming it the whole way through. And I want to know what ends up if my opinions end up changing. So we're going to have this video just sort of serve as the based on nostalgia, and then we're going to say based on recent experience when we actually get around to playing through all of them. So I hope you'll stick around and wait for that video to come out and hopefully catch some of the streams along the way. So let's get into this. You knew this was coming. Skylanders Superchargers is probably my least favorite Skylanders game, without a doubt. At least based on memory. Let me explain. While Superchargers has some of the cooler figures, admittedly, the gimmick is kind of lame. The Superchargers really are not the coolest of all of them. And Superchargers has the fewest of the actual Skylanders and has just as many vehicles as it does Skylanders. Also, I hate racing games. Racing games are not my thing. I really only barely enjoy Mario Kart, and I only really enjoy that because of, the social aspect of it. The only saving grace that stops me from completely hating Superchargers is the more combat-oriented focus of, the vehicular portions. I really was not a huge fan of it, especially the land parts. The other parts, honestly, were not anywhere near as bad. The sky and the sea ones were not as bad, although I did find sky combat to probably be the worst of all of the combats that were present in the game. Overall, racing was just not for me, and I didn't really get captured enough by the actual gameplay to rank it any higher. Honestly, it's such a shame, because in my opinion, the gameplay is actually pretty good, and the story is definitely best in class, but it doesn't do enough to recoup the fact that I hate the racing, and it sours me on the entire game. This one is going to be just as controversial as ranking Superchargers in last, and it's Skylanders Giants. Skylanders Giants is probably my fifth favorite of the 6 Skylanders games. Here's why. Something I always stressed that I did not like about a lot of the Skylanders games was the lack of post-game content. And while Spyro's Adventure can actually you can kind of let it off the hook for that, because it has a fairly rewarding story, it has good adventure packs, and despite not having the post-game content, the game itself is just rewarding enough to be worth it. Giants, though, says, okay, let's do one thing. We've got the arena battles, and that's all they really had. And as a result, Giants isn't much better than Spyro's Adventure, and really did not improve on Spyro's Adventure, which, to be fair, you don't have to improve on Spyro's Adventure very much. Spyro's Adventure is a good game on its own. It's higher than Giants, as I would say. But the reason that Giants declined for me is that it just felt like Spyro's Adventure 2. The story was kind of cool, but it honestly wasn't that great. The whole lore behind the Giants didn't make a ton of sense. They went on to ruin it even more in the later games. And the Giants, I will admit, are one of the cooler gimmicks, especially because of the light core elements. But ultimately, it's not enough to save it from the fact that the story is so very short, and honestly, I didn't enjoy Brock's arena battles enough to really rank it much higher. Although, I disliked Superchargers post-game content even more, I will say, because all it was racing, and then you could repeat the Spell Slamzer level, which was arguably worse than the Brock's arena battle. So there is the reason that Giants is number 5, based on my memory. And here is number 4, Skylanders Imaginators. Skylanders Imaginators ranks this low for pretty much the same exact reasons as Skylanders Giants. The story is short, and on top of that, there's very little post-game content. There is more post-game content, though, in Imaginators than in Giants, but it's still, an insult compared to even Trap Team, and especially compared to Swap Force. They replaced a lot of the original beloved characters with the Skylanders that had forgettable personalities and essentially tried to make it Skylanders Academy the game. That's really what it felt like to me personally. That being said, the gimmick was done much better than it was in Trap Team. The creation crystals are honestly so much better than traps. Even though they were overpriced at $10 and they should have probably been priced the same as the traps, I still give them a pass on that. The Imaginators concept was really cool. Being able to create your own characters is an awesome idea, and I just wish it had more post-game content because it would have made creating your characters and perfecting their builds so much more fun and so much more entertaining. But ultimately, again, it's that bad story and that lack of post-game content and probably some of the worst boss fights across the entire series that makes it rank at number 4. And now we're getting into the top half of the rankings. And coming up next is number 3, Skylanders Trap Team. Skylanders Trap Team originally probably would have ranked as my favorite. Back when I used to play, I used to say that Trap Team was my favorite game. Trap Team is probably not my favorite game based on memory. It has several glaring issues. Even though I'm a collector, I can't help but acknowledge a lot of the issues that were present with like the elemental gates, and honestly, it has some of the most uninspiring characters of the entire game franchise. And although the Trap Masters themselves are cool, you could have very easily cut out half of them, and I don't know that it would have made that big of a deal. But more so is the lack of the memorable cores. Most of the core characters in this game are totally non-memorable. Like the only really good ones would probably be Spotlight and Blackout, since they were our first light and dark characters. And then you have characters like Chopper. I personally really liked Food Fight and Blades, and that was really it. A lot of the other ones you could really just forget about. Now, don't get me wrong, some of those cores are cool, and I do like them. Like, Funny Bone is a cool character, but honestly, we didn't need him. They could have just stuck with Trap Masters if that was really what they wanted to do. Trapping villains, though, was a super cool concept. I loved being able to play as the villains. I do wish that there had been more depth to playing as them, as there was only one upgrade that you could really unlock for them. It's kind of like completing a soul gem. And that was really it. I wish they had done more with villains. If villains had more, I don't know, interactivity and felt more like you were really upgrading the villains, it might have ranked higher, but again, also the trap system is kind of what kills it for me as well. But the story is cool. The story is not the best. It's not the strongest of the franchise. We're about to get up on what I consider to be, probably the strongest or the second strongest story, depending on how you compare it to Superchargers' story here in a moment. The story's not too great, but it's also not bad. I would say the story is probably mid-tier with Trap Team. The introduction of the light and dark characters, though, I also thought was cool, and I also think that the levels were a lot better designed. I know that a lot of people like Superchargers levels because they all felt like they were very unique and had very cool ecosystems, and I do agree with that, but they were just too darn long. I get that they were broken up into chapters, and same thing goes for Swap Force, but I like the shorter levels. I think that it makes the game feel better when it's shorter levels. That's my personal opinion, and I think that's why I put Trap Team at number 3. And now for number 2, Skylanders Spyro's Adventure, the original game. I would put this cleanly in the number 2 spot for me, and here's why. In my opinion, Spyro's Adventure still has the best Skylanders story. You can compare it to Superchargers. It's probably debated, and I might even say Superchargers has a better story sometimes. I really like the darkness plot with it. But Spyro's Adventure feels the most magical out of any of the games. And maybe it's the old graphics, maybe it's the nostalgia, maybe it's the fact that it's the first one I played, but the idea of hunting down the elemental sources and reconstructing the core of light is so cool. And you have all these miniature fights against Chaos, and you feel like you're really pushing back against his forces. It feels really, really cool to play through, especially for the first time. And as you're defeating Chaos's enemies, it culminates in a gigantic end boss fight against all of them. Yes, the boss fight is super long, yes, the boss fight is super hard and super tedious, but it's so rewarding once you finally beat it. Spyro's Adventure is very clearly the first game in the franchise, though, and suffers partly because of that. And for starters, it has no post-game content, and you can also see that it's lacking a lot of the features of the later games. For instance, it doesn't have the jump button. It lacks some of the complexity of the later, puzzles, although a lot of people, I think, do like the original Lock Goblin challenges, and some people, probably enjoy some of the puzzles in Spyro's Adventure. I do think that the puzzles did tend to get better as the game went on, and that's why, to me, it ranks as number 2 instead of number 1, just because it lacks some of the polish of the later games. So, now you know what number 1 is for me, which is Skylanders Swap Force. Swap Force without a doubt has the most innovative gimmick in the entire gaming franchise. The Swap Force is so cool, being able to remove the tops and bottoms of the characters and swap them around to create your own characters. Granted, it is definitely not the same complexity as the Imaginators from, Skylanders Imaginators, but it's still such a cool concept, and those are still, to me, some of the coolest characters. They're so small compared to the later gimmick characters, it's almost funny, because you've got the Senseis almost the same size as Giants. This is back, before Toys for Bob decided that every gimmick character needed to be the size of a Skylander Giant. But ultimately, Swap Force just takes it for me. The story, the artwork, the graphics are gorgeous. I know some people don't like the Vicarious Visions design, and I used to be one of them, but honestly, Swap Force is one of the best looking games in the entire franchise. Superchargers is the best looking, but Swap Force is the second best looking. And again, it just really sold me on the new art direction that Skylanders took following Giants. I just really think it did a great job. Some things it did remove and felt a little questionable. It did lose some of the original magic of Skylanders, which is something I do still applaud Giants for. Giants still felt like it stuck to the original theming of Skylanders, but I would say that's probably also why it only feels like an expansion pack. Swap Force felt like it was going truly in a new direction, and I think a lot of the changes it made were for the better, and should have stuck around longer in the franchise. I really liked the adventure packs as opposed to the battle packs, and I liked that Swap Force brought that back. I also really liked the gimmick with the Swap Force that was talking about the movement types. It was cool that the gimmick for Swap Force wasn't just the fact that they could swap their tops and bottoms. It was that they also had the movement type. They are definitely the most unique gimmick characters aside from maybe the Giants. The Swap Force and the Giants you can look at and you can say, wow, they're really cool. They look like a special group of characters. You look at the Superchargers, you look at the Trapmasters, you don't really see anything special about them other than the Superchargers sit on an engine block and the Trapmasters have these clear weapons for some reason. The Senseis look like core characters that are statuified with little symbols on the bottom. They are definitely not as cool as the Swap Force movement types. The Swap Force movement types combined with combining your own characters, really cool. Swap Force also has more post-game content than any other game that was ever made for Skylanders, and it's really a shame that they didn't do that in later games. And also, it had battle mode, so ultimately Swap Force probably feels like the most content-heavy Skylanders game just because of all the stuff you can do once you've beaten the main story. So there you have it. There is my nostalgia-based rankings of all of the Skylanders games. We'll go back through it one more time. We've got Superchargers coming in at number 6. We've got Giants coming in at number 5. We've got Imaginators coming in at number 4. Then we've got Trap Team coming in at number 3. Then we've got Spyro's Adventure coming in at number 2. And we've got Swap Force coming in number 1. So I'm really interested to see your reactions to this video. What is your ranking? Do you like my ranking? Do you hate my ranking? Do you think I'm an idiot because this is the way that I rank them? Well, good news for you because I am going to be replaying all the games and coming up with a new ranking for them. Most likely some of these will switch around. Some of them might jump a lot. We'll see what ends up happening once I've replayed all these games. I'm really excited to do it, and I hope you guys will stick around to see that video as well. That's all I've got for you guys today. Thank you so much for watching. This has been Portalmaster. Remember to like, comment, subscribe, and go check me out on both Twitter and Instagram, link down in the description, as well as the Discord where you can jump in and talk with other Skylanders fans that just want to talk. That's all I have for you guys today. See you guys next time. Thanks again for watching. I just wanted to take some time to thank my generous patrons on Patreon, including APYT Skylanders, Haley, Cinderclash, Adrian, OctoBoom, True Blue Dogemon, and HypnoticOcelot.